All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're just going to wait a minute or so to see that all of our attendees can get on and get settled and get ready for us to start. All right. So welcome, everyone, to the Teach for America and WorldTeach online event, Global Issues in Education, Gender Disparities, and Technology. We have a pretty good turnout tonight, and we're so pleased to have you all join us in our conversation. So as people start to sign on still, I see a few people coming in into the webinar, into the event. We'll just take a few minutes to go over our agenda and what we have planned for this evening so that you know where we are and what we're headed to do. So to start, we'll spend a few minutes meeting our panelists and learning a bit about their background. Then we'll spend a few minutes setting the context for the discussion. We have some statistics to share with you about the status of education in the U.S. as well as around the world. From there, we'll move into our first topic, which is gender disparities. For that topic, as well as for the technology topic, we'll pose several questions to our panelists to hear about their perspectives and what they've observed in classrooms throughout the world. And lastly, we've devoted the bulk of our time tonight to the question and answer section. During this time, you at the audience will have the opportunity to pose questions to our panelists. At any point throughout the presentation, though, you can feel free to chat in questions that you might have about Teach for America or WorldTeach, or questions for the panelists through the question chat function that you should see on your screen. We'll have staff on the line ready to answer, and we'll save some of your questions for the end for the Q&A session. We might also have a bit of time to do one or two interactive polls to get your input so that we can bring you into the conversation. So with that, let's get started. To formally introduce myself, my name is Kara, and I'm the Director of Communications and Marketing at WorldTeach. I've been with WorldTeach for about 5 years now, which is a little bit unbelievable, but I started as a volunteer teacher in the Costa Rica program, and that picture that you're seeing on the right is me with my 5th grade students in Costa Rica in our classroom. Since then, I've worked as the field director in Costa Rica, and then I came to the U.S. to work as a program manager in our U.S. office. And now I am here, and I will be co-facilitating tonight with Christy from Teach for America, and here she is to introduce herself.
Thanks, Kara, and welcome to everyone out there. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. I'm so excited to work with WorldTeach on this presentation, and happy to be here. So I graduated from University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. So if there are any Tar Heel fans out there, feel free to chat that in and say hello. I taught in St. Louis through Teach for America. Starting in 2008, I taught 4th grade. Those are some of my students on a field trip to the courthouse in St. Louis where the Dred Scott case was decided. So after teaching with the Teach for America Corps, I went to graduate school at the University of Georgia and studied educational administration and policy. So I've now been on staff at Teach for America for a year, so not as long as Kara, but I work with folks, so I'm a manager of recruitment, so I work with people that are out of college already, have graduated from college and are working in education or nonprofit fields or similar areas and are interested in joining Teach for America. So I am very excited to introduce our guest panelists today. We have some awesome folks with some great experiences. So first, I would love to introduce Amanda Liu. Amanda, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Sure. I'm originally from North Carolina, and I am a 2011 graduate of Harvard. I studied government and African studies, and the African studies minor was inspired by my experience as a WorldTeach volunteer in Namibia the summer of 2008. After teaching with WorldTeach, I began to examine my interests in race issues and education inequity, started investigating race issues in the United States, and decided that I wanted to put a dent in this problem by joining Teach for America. I'm a member of the 2011 Corps in New Orleans, where I teach math, and I currently just finished my 2-year commitment. I'm staying at my placement school, and I'll be teaching AP Statistics and serving as the college advisor at the school for the rest of the day.
Thanks, Amanda. Thanks for being here with us tonight. And then next, we have Lisa Grant, who has experience with WorldTeach. Lisa, could you tell us a little bit about yourself as well?
Sure. Well, I was born in New York, but grew up here in Los Angeles and attended UCLA. I was a geography major, and my absolute favorite course was geography of sub-Saharan Africa. So I knew someday I wanted to go there, and made it happen finally so many years later, and really had a wonderful experience teaching there for a year. And I've been home for a year now. I went with WorldTeach, and let's see, I've worked different jobs here. I used to be in the environmental field, but now I'm currently teaching because I did get my TEFL certificate and there. So now I am teaching English at a school here in Los Angeles, and I missed it. I didn't teach for a little while after I returned, and I found that I missed it. So now I'm teaching again.
It just keeps pulling you back. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks for being with us tonight. We have one more panelist. He has not been able to make it on the line yet, so he may join us later, and I will just give a brief bio in case he's able to join us. Ben Rasmussen, he is a Teach for America alum. He taught in the Mississippi Delta starting in 2009. He then went to WorldTeach and volunteered as a teacher in Micronesia, where he is still currently working with the Department of Education. So he has mentioned before that internet can sometimes be an issue. So if he's able to join us later, if the internet comes back on, we will hopefully get to hear from him. So yeah, thanks again, everyone, for being here with us. One interesting thing that I would like to point out to you all, we have several people on the line here, and Kara helped put together this amazing slide here just to give us a fun, quick look at where the folks who registered for this event are coming from. So it looks like we've got a very broad representation across the U.S. and across the world. So thanks again for joining us from many different time zones, especially those of you on the East Coast that are here a little bit late right now. Okay, great. So what we're going to do next is, before we hear from our panelists, Kara and I are just going to briefly talk about what's going on with this issue of educational inequity throughout the world. I'll first touch on what this looks like in the U.S. So right now, there are 16 million students living in poverty in the U.S. About 50% of them will graduate from high school. And of those 8 million who do graduate from high school, on average, they will only graduate at an 8th grade level of skills. You can also see on this slide here that only 8% of children growing up in low-income communities will actually graduate college by the age of 24. I think the most shocking disparity here is that when you take this number or take this idea of graduating college by the age of 24 and look at it from higher income communities, we actually see that 80% of our children in higher income communities are graduating college by 24. So there is a very stark difference between the opportunities that we are providing for our children in low-income communities versus what students in wealthier areas are receiving. Tara, do you want to touch on what this looks like worldwide?
Yes, definitely. So around the world, this graphic here on this slide is actually from UNESCO, and it represents some of the data that they've collected, which shows that there's certainly educational inequity in other parts of the world as well. And though there are normally ebbs and flows in terms of the resources for teaching personnel, I'm sure most of you have heard about the Millennium Development Goals, and one of those goals is that by 2015, children everywhere, boys and girls alike, will be able to complete a full course of primary schooling. However, in order to reach that goal, the world essentially needs 6.8 million teachers to fill in for those ebbs and flows. About 1.7 million new teachers will be needed to accommodate growing populations, and 5.1 million teachers will be needed to replace in terms of attrition. And so this is also only accounting for primary education. It doesn't even go into what you need for secondary education or higher education. So you can imagine how many more teachers would be needed to provide education at all levels of schooling.
Thanks for that context, Tara. So I will share just real briefly, because I know you all are ready to hear more from our panelists about their specific experiences, but we'll just tell you very quickly what Teach for America is doing to address the issue that I talked about before. So we first start by enlisting committed individuals, so recruiting people that are ready to join this fight against the inequities that I mentioned before, and are ready and wanting to provide a high-quality education for all kids, and who believe that every single kid in this country can learn and can achieve at high levels. The next thing that we do is we invest in these leaders that we've recruited by training them and supporting them to become highly effective teachers in their classroom setting, and to build relationships within their community, and to really work to build out this effort. The final piece of how we seek to address this issue is by fueling the long-term impact of our alumni. So all of our teachers sign on for at least a 2-year teaching commitment in a low-income community across the country. And after their 2 years, we continue to support them and develop them as leaders, whether that path keeps them in the classroom for the rest of their careers or pushes them into school leadership, policy leadership, other avenues from which they can affect the broader inequities and the things that we see affecting the educational inequity piece specifically. And Kara's going to take us through WorldTeach's mission as well.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, we share many similar philosophies and points of the mission as Teach for America. And we just work in a global context and mobilize college graduates who have a passion to empower underserved students through education. So we work in countries who request our help and our volunteers to come to their classrooms and teach different subjects. A lot of times teaching English as a foreign language, as it's been identified from many governments as a priority for their education initiatives, and other times teaching science or math or entrepreneurship or IT lessons to students throughout the world. And we work to give students the tools they need to gain access to wider career opportunities. So whether that's we working with students in primary school and helping them have the skills and motivation to continue their studies in high school, or whether that's working in high school or higher education to give them the skills they need to get a job. It's working towards all those things. And at the same time, working to create citizens of the world that feel responsible not only to their home country but also to the global community. So through the grassroots work of our volunteers, seeing how education is in other countries, seeing the cultures of other countries, having them feel really a part of a bigger context than just their home country where they come from. So from there, we are going to dive right into the best part of this, I think, and hearing from our wonderful alumni panelists. They have experience in the U.S. classrooms, in worldwide classrooms, so we have a few questions we have lined up for them about gender disparities. So we're going to jump into that now. So this first question, I'm going to ask for Lisa to answer this first. As a teacher, did you encounter gender equality or inequality in your classroom or school?
Well, that's a long answer, but no, actually, I can say yes and no. I sort of was writing out a list of things that I felt were how I encountered equality. Mm-hmm. So my experience was in my school, as far as treatment in the classroom by teachers, staff, I found many things were very equal. The expectations of students' behavior. So, you know, in Tanzania, there is a lot of discipline. I'll just start with that. So across the line, that was very much the same. Discipline, punishment, carrying bricks, things like that, very equal for boys and girls. Students are sent on errands quite often. That was equal. Now, even leadership. Students are encouraged or appointed to positions, and I found they did it both for boys and girls, very much so for girls, so I wouldn't say they were left out at all. There is environmental cleanliness is very important at many of the schools, all of the schools I would say in Tanzania. So there's a lot of cleaning going on. Both boys and girls did that. However, there are traditional roles which were, you know, maintained. They were still used at school. For example, only girls clean the floors. There were many times where students are asked to cook, and this would be done only by the girls. Lifting heavy buckets of water, that would be done by the boys or males. So I know these don't seem like educational things, but in the school environment, yes, you have your classroom time, but for me, a lot of the class time, the students were outside of the classroom doing other things. And of course, they were influenced by, you know, the traditions, the culture. But I would say that, let me see, I have other things written here. The inequalities, let me just see. Inequalities, oh yeah, okay. What I found also for me in the classroom, I taught both Form 1 is where they enter secondary school, and then, you know, Form 2, 3, 4 is where they leave, at least the part I was teaching. They have Form 5 and 6. But the point is, when they come into the school, I found that the gap was not as noticeable between the males and females. There was, because I think in primary school they've done a very good job of making it more equal. But I did notice after 4 years that the gap widened. Why? Well, I think that, for example, as they get into Form 3, Form 4, they're taking the science courses. And at my school, they were encouraged, the girls were encouraged to take more science, more advanced science, chemistry, physics. And however, they didn't seem to do as well on the tests. So I would say that that field is still dominated by the male students as far as taking the class and then how they perform on the achievement tests.
Interesting.
So, yeah, it was, but they are, one thing I found that was important was, you know, there were a lot of very strong women at our school. So the second headmaster was a woman, and the girls, I think this was important, for role modeling, but also, you know, she sort of looked after the women. She made sure, or the girls, that they were being placed in leadership roles. There were leadership roles at the school, and she would actually appoint some girls to make sure that they were being heard as a leader. One thing that changed, let me see, I don't want to answer like the wrong question, but I would say one thing that made it more equal, I felt, is while I was there, they added the A-level, Form 5 and 6, they added girls. Now these are boarding students. So at my school, previous to that, there were only male boarding students. And when they introduced the female students, I found the whole dynamic at the school really did change, more in favor of the girls, of course, because they came in and, wow, their English was better than any of the students there. And they started posting these signs all over the school, no English, no service. And things really started to change. You could sort of feel the female power in the school after they came into it. So I know, you know, I've done my research, and I'm well aware that, you know, traditionally the equality is very great, especially in the field of science and math. But I guess the bottom line is my experience, and as a teacher inside the classroom, I found the girls were just as, they participated just as much as the boys. They raised their hands, they wanted to answer. In fact, in a few of my classes more so, I had a lot of, I think a lot of the girls can feel that the government there is very concerned about lessening this gap, and I think it's well known. The teachers certainly are aware of it, and the girls are just being you know, given the opportunity to go to school, which I found my classes were equal, boys and girls.
That's great. That's very reassuring to hear.
I know, you know, because I know that it's not, you would expect, I guess, more boys, but I did have equal amount of students, girls and boys.
Excellent. So now I'm going to pose this same question to Amanda to see how her differences were maybe similar or a bit different. So Amanda, if you could chime in on this, did you encounter gender equality or inequality in your classrooms, either in Namibia or here in the U.S.?
I would say that I definitely encountered gender inequality in both places, and it's interesting because I think it was a different gender in both places. So to start off with my experience in Namibia, in general, I just noticed my female learners were just much more quiet and less likely to engage or less likely to volunteer. And that's something that really bothered me, especially as someone who comes from a family of very strong female academics. So, I mean, I would, you know, deliberately call on female students, and I don't know if that was an effective strategy because like that's not something that you became or they would naturally become comfortable with just because I was doing it. But I think over time and just seeing my presence and my confidence in them, within my classroom walls at least, my students became more confident, or my female students became more confident. And then I think what has troubled me a lot since becoming a teacher in New Orleans is obviously the issues that we see facing black males in our society. I think obviously that's been in the news a lot lately with Trayvon Martin, and then but also seeing the achievement gap between my male students and my female students. And honestly, like what I can pin it all down to in both places is extreme difference in expectations for each gender. And I think that in Namibia, there's just kind of the expectation that my female students were not going to go to university, and if they were not going to pursue competitive jobs like engineering or really any job in the STEM field. And then when I'm thinking about my male students, just the images that society has pushed onto them, and then also the images that they see of people who look like them. It's been, I think about their plight a lot and how, as an Asian American female, I fit into that as a mentor, and it's sometimes really hard to be able to relate to them and say, like, you know, like, these are the things you have to do, these are the things I believe you can do when you don't look like them and you haven't experienced the same prejudice that they've experienced. So yeah, I would say that, like, gender has played an interesting role in both places I've taught, and it's been both inspiring to see the progress that can be made, but also really disheartening to see how that has determined what they perceive their life pathways to be.
Yeah, definitely challenging situation. And then sticking with you, Amanda, can you expand a bit upon the strategies, attitudes, or policies that you observed that specifically inhibited progress towards gender equality?
Absolutely. So I feel like in Namibia there was a general, I feel like my female students were more intimidated by my male students, whether that be in social interactions or in academic interactions. And there is definitely kind of a deferral process that they did with the males. Like if like one male learner would say this, then that would kind of be what went. If a male student raised his hand, they expected the teacher to call on them, and there's just a kind of lack of accountability there because there was that deferral process. And then I think I spoke a little bit about kind of the image of the black male and our society and what's expected of my black male students, and seeing like the balance they have to have, especially my brighter students who, I mean, I think there's that famous Barack Obama quote where like we need to change the image of the black male holding a book is considered not black or acting white. I feel like it's some of my brighter students that I've had in class, especially my males, have a really tough time both kind of traversing the line of like quote-unquote acting black and being accepted by peers, but also being academically successful and taking pride in that. And I think of one student in particular. He's going to be playing football at Columbia University in the fall, and the kind of behavior problems I would see from him would just be so incredibly frustrating because he would say things like, you know, like, we're not going to get this because we're black, and it would be like a joke, and his peers would laugh, but like I've had really serious conversations with him that like kind of scratched the surface of like his own inferiority complex that he's developed as a really intelligent black male, but noticing that like people just expect less from him and give less to him because of his skin color and because of his gender within that skin color. So I feel like not only is there kind of societal pressure that's being put on these young men and women in their different atmospheres, but it's also what becomes ultimately more damaging is how that societal image gets reflected in their own self-evaluation of their worth and their capabilities and what they're expected to be able to do. So I think it just becomes this like self-fulfilling prophecy when you have lower expectations for a certain gender, that they're going to perform at a lower standard.
Definitely. And so then on the flip side of that, if we send this back over to Lisa, who touched upon this a little bit when you were talking previously, what were some of the effective strategies that you observed that helped promote gender equality among students?
Yeah, I actually did. I was kind of all over there and did cover what I was thinking about saying to address that question, and that was, I think, well, I guess you could consider it a strategy to add girls to the school, more girls. I mean, it certainly did have that impact of kind of giving a climate of equality when they came in. So that certainly was good. And I think also, as the government has made everyone well aware of their intention and their concern about education, improving education, and a part of that being equality for both male and female students, that they are, I didn't meet a lot of female headmasters, I will say that. That wasn't, but under them, second headmasters and other important staff were females, and I think that that was a strategy to place women in leadership roles. Also, the regional offices there, all of the education departments that I visited, there were a lot of female leaders. From the time I got there in the department, the Ministry of Education, to the regional offices, that's where I saw a lot of very, top positions held by women. So I think that the students are aware of this, that there is opportunity, but I think, let me see, strategy, that, hold on.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, lost my place here, my notes. Let me see. Treatment, traditional, what was I saying? Yeah, sorry about that. I just lost my place. Oh, here we are. Sorry. Yeah, but so I think that there are, as I said before, even in the school, that role modeling is good. But the effective strategies in my particular school were actually placing students in those positions, which I already talked about, actually. So the in classes, science classes, and as they have, head girl, head boy, for sports and other things. And I did discuss this with the second headmaster, and she wanted to place certain girls in these positions. Yeah, so.
Great, and we have gotten a great question from the audience from Thomas Collins, and he asks about, in Tanzania, what is the cultural attitude towards female teachers? Is there any sense that women are preferred teachers or are men?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say there's not a strong preference, because teachers in Tanzania are very feared. I hate to say that, but they really did. They loved me because they knew I wasn't going to hit them. But the punishment is, they're all hit, and that's just a part of it. Not that they walk around in fear constantly, but so it's kind of a fine line. Do they really respect the teachers, or are they fearful of them? I guess it's kind of both. definitely females are looked up to as teachers. And I didn't notice that there was a strong preference, but I think it's just the position of teacher that, you know, gets the respect, sort of demands respect. And there are, my experience, definitely more female teachers than males. And they, well, I could go into teaching. But I think that sort of answers it, I hope.
Yes, great. I think that was a great answer. And then we have one more question from the audience from, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, from Kwame. And this is towards Amanda about what you were talking about previously in terms of what form did the intimidation surface? Was it subtle or pronounced? Was it school culture or isolated incidents, and what measures could help address that?
Sure. I was a little intentionally vague on that just because I didn't want to give a negative view of my male learners, but I do think a lot of their behavior, especially what they would do, I think in the U.S., if it was done in the U.S. classroom, would be construed as sexual harassment, whether that be touching a girl's hair, making a comment about her body. It was very clear that the boys viewed their female classmates as not equal to them because they were very sexual objects. And that kind of filtered down. I mean, it wasn't unheard of in Namibia for male teachers to have affairs with female students or to even have father children with female students. So I think, like, what was probably the most damaging was the sexual intimidation.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And so for now, after those wonderful thoughts and observations, we're going to move on to the next session. We do have a few more questions. Great questions are coming in actually about gender and your experiences. We'll save them to the end for the Q&A that we have towards the end of the hour. But for now, let's move on to the second topic, which is technology in the classroom. And Chris,
thank you all so much for your thoughts there. I know we're kind of taking it in a very different direction here, but technology is also an issue that very much varies by classroom and culture, and so I'd love to hear some of your thoughts, Lisa and Amanda, on what this kind of looks like in your classroom. So we'll move on to the first question here. Just if you could give us a quick and brief overview of what technology actually looks like in your classroom and in your school. How do people use technology? What does that look like? We'll start with Lisa, and then we'll go with Amanda next.
Okay. I hate to have to tell you this, but in my school it was practically a big zero. Yeah, there were two school computers. One was in the headmaster's office, and there was another one in a very small faculty room for just the faculty. The connection there was not very fast at all. In fact, when I tried to use my computer, I mean, I could not Skype from my village at all. I had to take a 4-hour bus ride to the nearest large city to do that. But you know, it would work. It just was pretty slow. So that's computers. There were now there were two broken down typewriters. I know that's sort of old-fashioned, but because I started a typing club after school, I used those broken down typewriters and my computer, and funny enough, mostly girls came to that, and they learned to type. They loved learning to type, and I so wished that we had more computers at that school. That would have been amazing. Funny, I had them all like make paper typewriter like keys because we didn't have enough. So, but they were learning where the keys were, and they really loved it. So I heard that after I left, there was an internet cafe was added to the little village. I was kind of between two little towns, and they put an internet cafe in one. However, I can't imagine that it was very fast, so I don't think that's going to make a very big difference. Now, yeah, that's pretty much all the technology that we had at our
Thanks.
school.
Yeah, thanks. That gives a really good picture. Amanda, can you also talk through what technology looks like both in your Namibia classroom and school and in New Orleans too?
Sure. In the classroom itself, all we had was a chalkboard. So I was actually brought to Namibia to teach computer skills to learners and to teachers. And it was a really interesting experience because we had a small computer lab that had a tenuous internet connection is how I would describe it. So I ran after school classes with the teachers, and it was really interesting to do because some of these teachers were they were actually all older teachers who had been teaching for a long time and had never touched a computer. And so I actually had a lot of difficulty conveying kind of the I guess the steps of using a computer that I found really innate. So like using a mouse, typing. And I actually don't think I was really affected because like not only was I like not really trained to say, okay, like these are all the steps to like open up a window, these are what windows are, like it was also kind of, it was kind of hard to convince them or to invest them in the use of a computer. Whereas I feel like my students who were more connected with other things and knew that technology could facilitate access to other things, that they were interested like music or sports, were really into the idea of computers. But and this is kind of a common thread between my experience here in New Orleans and Namibia, but they didn't really get the kind of professional and practical use of computers and expanding their own career prospects or their own pathways. So I think here in New Orleans I'm almost oversaturated with technology because we've actually gotten a lot of grants in the city and at my school post-Katrina for technology. So I have a smart board. I used to have a classroom set of Mac desktops. I had a laptop cart. We have iPad carts. And I still kind of struggle with conveying why computers are useful to my students in terms of like how they're useful academically and professionally. And that's kind of been the struggle that I have. I almost find technology to be a little bit of a distractor just because like I guess the skills that are required to build a really great PowerPoint or an Excel spreadsheet that can calculate your budget they're much more difficult to learn than like Googling and downloading an MP3 that you can then put on your phone and use as a ringtone, or using Instagram to connect with your friends. And it's been, I think, a struggle for me to kind of learn how to instruct on the computer without it being a distraction. And I think what's kind of telling about that, the commonality in both Namibia and New Orleans, is that like, technology is a really useful tool for students, but it's really interesting to see what the most immediate need or the most immediate urge with them to use technology is built off of. And I think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done on how to train teachers and professionals on how to educate young adults on how to use technology in a way that is not only entertaining for your spare time, but also useful and for your career skills.
Great. Thanks, Amanda. I think we had a good question come in the chat that I'm actually going to ask right now as well. So the question here was about, I actually lost it here. Someone may have already answered it in the chat, but I'd love to hear Amanda and Lisa's perspective too. So given that it sounds like in sunsetting technology was not a huge a huge piece of what you are doing, and I know that in many cases across the U.S. is the context that I have. But what can we do on a broader level to ensure that all of our students, regardless of the neighborhood they're living in or maybe the village that they're in as well, what can we do on a broader level to make sure that everyone has access to technology that will help them be successful? So that was kind of a merging of the question in the chat and also this question around the slide. So Lisa, do you want to take that one first?
Yeah. Oh, it's getting quiet. The volume. Well, that's really difficult to answer for, the work that I did in Africa as far as relating that, to living in that village, trying to picture what could be done to get them all access to technology. I mean, I'm sure eventually, well, look at it this way. I mean, a few years ago, maybe 7 years ago, they didn't even have internet there. So, yes, they're making strides for sure. And, the electricity has been, now they have electricity in, well, all over there, actually. They didn't have that either. So certainly strides are being made. But I think that, if we're just talking about today, you have to go with, like, for example, when I was there, my main focus was to, like, get a library going, and I was able to do that, leave them with a library, which was pretty exciting because they didn't even have that. So, I'm addressing it from the standpoint of bare minimum, just like Amanda said. I mean, I had a blackboard. Basically, that was it, and had to get very creative with my lessons. Used it, but it was kind of interesting. It was kind of fun seeing what I could come up with, using nature or using, it actually is quite challenging, but I like that because I like games and I like being challenged, and that's how it was every day, trying to come up with a lesson, without anything. It was kind of fun. So I don't know. I think that the library certainly helped, just giving them access to more books. And I think eventually, there's a lot of these Bill Gates, when they supply schools all over the world with those really cheap computers, that would be great. I could picture that happening. I think just continuing to help, volunteers getting in there, and their own government, actually. They really are pursuing it to try to get, more teaching aids, in this case technology, into the classrooms.
Thanks, Lisa. Great thoughts. Amanda, do you have thoughts as well on what we can do to help ensure that there is equal access to technology in the classroom?
Sure. I guess coming from the standpoint of looking at how my students in Namibia weren't prepared to be competitive global citizens, and I would still say that how my students in New Orleans and the way they approach technology, they are still not competitive when it comes to their technology use skills globally. So I think that, yes, it's great to provide gadgets. Like, it's great to have a laptop that is hand cranked. It's great to have an iPad in the hands of every student. And that, like, that access itself is obviously crucial in giving our students the skills that they need. But I still think when I think about my own gaps as an educator right now in my classroom with all this technology at my fingertips, like, I still don't know how to construct a really great technology-based lesson. I don't know how to teach my students. I mean, I do know how to do this, but it's something that I have to do. Like, how do I teach my students who have seen a keyboard since they were 5 to not keep pressing caps lock whenever they need to capitalize something? And how do I teach them to type properly, or how do I teach them all these things that are, like, for me, were innate things? And I think it comes back, a lot of it, when I look at it, comes back to literacy on some level, but I think there needs to be more of a discussion on, like, the educator training piece of it on how to use technology effectively in the classroom. I think that at this point, especially in the United States, that is where the gap is going to continue to widen, because it's not enough to kind of throw money at the issue and keep, like, it's great. I've seen a lot of schools in New Orleans that have one laptop per kid. But on the same token, like, if that laptop's not being used effectively, then that's an expensive piece of equipment that is not bringing our students any closer to closing the gap between what they can do and what their higher income peers can do. So that's kind of where I see what direction would actually help propel our students into the 21st century.
Thanks, Amanda. I really like that point there. It's more than what's on the surface level. That it's much more complicated than that.
Yeah.
Great point. Thank you. So we have a question for the audience now. For everyone who's in here listening, Kara, do you want to explain how this poll will work?
Sure, absolutely. So we want to hear a little bit about your guys' input into what you think is the most beneficial or driving factor towards achieving gender and technology parity in the classroom. And so I'm going to pop this poll up on your screen, and it will give you the ability to select what you think is the most important factor, and you can select several things or just one thing, and then we'll leave that up for about 30 seconds and see what you guys think, and then we'll be able to display the live results right here to see what our audience is thinking about this. So I'm just going to pop this up right now, and you should be able to see it on your screen. Get those votes in before we see what the final tally is. Let's see, 10 more seconds. Okay, I'm going to close the poll right now and then put that up on the screen for you, the results. So you can see we had almost the whole audience vote, which is excellent. And we have 42% think money is a factor. The highest one, interesting, is that through awareness or changes in social expectations, 92%. And then following that through institutional support, and then policy, and then money. So very interesting to see your thoughts on that. And so we do have a few minutes left before the hour is over that we're going to take to address some of the excellent questions that you've all sent in about gender and about technology, and pose them for Lisa and Amanda. So let's see which is the first question that we're going to start with. Here we go. Let's see. So this is an interesting question, bringing into the picture the community and their involvement in education. This is from Cleason, and it's to Amanda. Did you see any signs of encouragement for males from older community members in New Orleans?
Oh, absolutely. I think some of the strongest male role models that are in a lot of our students' lives are actually at the school, whether that be through our vice principal, who is a very successful black male himself, or through our football coaches. But I think everyone in New Orleans recognizes the problem of what is happening to our black males. Just to give you some context, we have one of the highest murder rates in the United States. I actually lost a student earlier this year, and it's it is it's a problem that everyone is aware of, I think, and I would say everyone at my school in particular, because it's been such a long-standing community school, which is pretty rare in New Orleans. Everyone is really invested in making sure that our males at school have very good role models and very good mentors. I think it's at this point like what we're all fighting as advocates for our black male students, and as or as a black male in this city, is how do we find pathways that that are accessible to us given the amount of discrimination we've experienced institutionally or blatantly, and also figuring out like how to project one's self-image and find where one fits in society. But yeah, there is a lot of community support, especially at my school. I see the coaches, I see the teachers, I see black males thinking about their peers a lot. I do think what I've really noticed even in the past 2 years of working at my school is that conversation has gotten broader, it's gotten more involvement from a lot of people, and it's becoming something that I think black males are talking about too, is how are we going to make sure that we're not leaving our brothers behind, or how are we going to make sure that we don't become another statistic. So yeah, I do think that there's a lot of community involvement and a lot of self-reflection about this topic.
Excellent. And Courtney has another question, Courtney from the audience, that deals with sort of the outside of school atmosphere. So I'm going to throw this towards Lisa, and then also we'll hear from you after that, Amanda. But how did you as teachers deal with issues that stemmed from inside the home? What kinds of help were you able to give disadvantaged students that had issues outside of school? Did you spend more time with them outside of school hours? What do you think the best thing a teacher can do when trying to help disadvantaged or impoverished students? Sort of a big question there, but excellent.
Yeah, and it sort of almost addresses every student there, because, I mean, yeah, there was, you know, a difference, I guess, but it was pretty slight. Most of my students were pretty impoverished. But what did I do to help? I mean, I did do things. I did hold many classes after school. I would try to catch people up on their reading. Sometimes there was one student I used to pull away when I didn't have a class. I would take him and I would actually work on his reading with him, because his reading was just so poor. I wanted him to at least be able to keep up. Let's see, other times you know, I did something, I don't even know if I should admit this, but I'll tell you, everyone. At the end of the quarter, and I took the students, a male and a female from each class, and I did pay for their school fees, which isn't much. It's like $12 US dollars, but to them it's a huge amount. And I did it, but not with everyone knowing. So it was, you know, of course they found out, they knew, but I just told the headmaster. So that was sort of a reward for, they were all impoverished, but that was for effort if they tried. They didn't even have to be the top student, but for those students that were really making an effort, I did that. And it was so funny because some of their families would like come and bring me a chicken for doing that, their way of thanking you. But also, I was just going to address the school, but with the teachers, I mean, it's very severe. If you don't go to school there and you are caught outside of school, you will get beat. So, you know, their opinion, the viewpoint of the whole area is that kids need to be in school, at least at secondary level. If you're not in school, you really do get in trouble. But I would, yeah. So I mean, I did try to help. the students wherever I could. I'm sure there are other examples, but I'll throw it over to Amanda.
Yeah, I'm hate to interject here because we are
Okay.
reaching the top of the hour. And there are so many more excellent questions that are coming in that we wish we had all the time to answer them, but we will definitely follow up with them after this. So I just want to thank you guys again for all coming to this tonight. This is the first time that Teach for America and WorldTeach have come together for sort of open discussion, and we think that these issues were particularly relevant right now. And we had a lot of fun preparing, so I hope that you guys enjoyed the presentation and our great panelists and their perspectives, and we will definitely follow up with these questions in the next couple of days. And yeah, so thanks again, everyone, for coming.
It was fun.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, too. Thanks for doing that.
Okay. Have a great evening.